Beep, 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 beep. Bombshell brunches.
See, that's what happens when you say to me before, hey, we need a new catchphrase, and I give you something golden and you don't record it, and then you press record and we get that. Every week will be different now.
No, we need one, Kristina. One.
I can't get... Can you remember that melody? I work in music. I can't remember what I just did. That's a lot of notes. And it's in the key of nothing.
Nothing.
Anyway,
does not exist.
Yes. Speaking of... I just don't even know how to link that. Speaking of the key of nothing, let's talk about careers. Yes, because I work in the music industry and I should know what key that's in, but it's in the key of nothing. I just decided. Anyway, good job, us. Welcome back. We are talking to my dad. And if you're not excited about that, that's okay. You don't know him.
You should be.
You will be excited about it, because if you have ever wanted to switch careers, if you don't know what you want to do, if you are in an industry where you're like, this is not transferable to the industry that I think I want to be in, if you love certain elements of your life but you don't know how that hooks into your career, this is the episode for you. We talk about academia, we talk about shooting at people. We don't actually talk about shooting at people. He was a police officer. I'm not going to give away the story, but there's a lot of transferability in very unlikely places. So if you haven't thought about recently what your resume looks like, how you're going to build your team, what you know you're capable of doing, if you want to apply for a new job and you think that you don't know if you're qualified for it, this is your episode. And we are very, very happy to have my dad come on to this show and pour all of this information and allow me to troll him, which is one of my favorite things to do.
AKA Dr. T. Just say his name.
That's right. That's
Makes
right.
you happy.
It's Dr. T. I don't
Dr.
call
T.
him that. I call him Dad. I call him Dad or Daddy, Father.
I
Papa.
really enjoyed that he signed off on the emails to both of us as Dad. That made me happy. I meant to bring it up during this.
Seeking that validation. Anyway, okay, good. All right, our BBs, enjoy this show.
Goodbye.
Bye.
You're listening to Bombshell Brunches, where your hosts Raquel Rodenberg and Kristina Lau sip and spill with badass babes every Tuesday morning.
Well, hello. This is my dad. My dad is on the podcast with a Canada toque, because it's not called a beanie, it's called a toque in this country, and an Iron Man t-shirt, and a very impressive headset. And I'm speaking like half in an American accent because I just came from 6.5 hours of doing an audiobook in an American accent, so I'm going to slip up, and my father will probably correct me if I continue to do so. So I want to introduce you to Dr. T, otherwise known as Daddy, or Dad, or Father, or Papa, depending on the mood and the day. But also happens to be one of my biggest heroes, one of my biggest influences, whether I wanted him to be or not, let's be honest. And also someone who I learned so much from in terms of career pathway planning, the person that I go to when I need to speak about business, when Raquel and I need to troubleshoot some business related topics. You know, Dad is always there, and a very good parent. He's not quite as good as Mum, but it's not a competition.
True.
So I'm going to give you Dad's numbered bio, and then I'm going to give you my bio of Dad, and we'll compare the two, shall we? So, Dad, about Dr. T, you can all call him Dr. T and not Dad. He's mine. 1, born in London, UK. Lived in UK, New Zealand, Australia, Hong Kong, and Canada. 2, career spans banking, police, military, private sector, construction, consulting, and teaching, instructing at a local university, which is what he is doing now. 3, sports included running, swimming, soccer, marathons, Ironman triathlons, 11, by the way, and now walking. That was very anticlimactic, Dad. And then number 4, hobbies include learning basic guitar. Dad, you just say learning guitar. You don't say basic guitar. You're learning the whole time. And how to read sheet music, piano, because we have a piano downstairs in the family home. I think it needs tuning, by the way. Number 5, interests, learning how to learn, and continuous learning. So Dad and I we have this list, the monstrous list of all the books to read, which I'm sure that he will bring up. 2 of his favorite people right now are Jim Quick and Sir Ken Robinson, I believe, are the 2 that are constantly quoted. But there are my bio of Dad, and the reason that I wanted to bring Dad onto this podcast was not just to test this new podcast software that we have. That has nothing to do with it. But was actually because I've been waiting to interview Dad with Raquel through a lens of continuous learning and development, but also from a perspective of so many creatives, so many like emerging entrepreneurs wanting to figure out what they want to do in their career and then actively pursue it. And Dad and I talked about a theme. Raquel and I talked about themes for Dad, and it's kind of difficult with someone who's spanned all these different types of industries throughout the course of his life, and it's been kind of intertwined with this really super high level of athleticism and an ability to really focus in and hone in on what his goals are, and we're going to talk about that as we come up through this conversation. But I wanted to bring Dad on because I think that it's really important now more than ever to really focus on how to learn and also to understand what you are amazing at doing and continuously run towards it. So many people who listen to the podcast, a lot of the feedback we've received so far has been about people really feeling like after they've listened to some of these gems and some of the guests that are on, that they feel like they can take that next step forward in their career, and they're feeling more able and equipped to do so. And Dad's doctorate, which I used to know this off by heart because I never want to read that document again, but it was in continuous learning and development for multinational corporate. Dad, what was the title of the doctorate?
It was learning and development. How do you transfer learning and use its relevance in multinational corporations globally?
Right. So just a short title.
Well, you should read it again then.
No, gosh, never again in my life. But I want to welcome Dad onto the podcast. Thank you for tolerating me again through another one of my things. And I'm like, Dad, this is what I'm doing now. And then sharing all this knowledge, which is going to be very useful. I mean, otherwise, we'll have to just not put it on air. Just kidding.
Carrot and the stick. If it's not good.
So, Dad, welcome, Dad.
Thank you. Raquel, thank you very much indeed. I'm looking forward to listening to persuasive communication.
Oh, yes, my persuasion.
Especially with the Dutch accent.
I haven't acquired one of those yet. Just sometimes. If there's a few drinks, maybe it'll come out.
Well, okay, so let's go straight into we'll talk about the academia, because Dad's experience actually lies in assisting and guiding major corporations in designing, developing, implementing strategic organizational development, strategic human resource management, learning and development, business change management, leadership and talent management, and quality assurance environmental management initiatives, which is in and around what he teaches at Kwantlen, which is the university that he lectures at the moment. And Dad is also the first person in our family, in his generation and any time before, to have a doctorate, which took 8 years. This is a story about focus and tenacity. So can you give everybody, Dad, can you give everyone a background on how you started working in HR and business. I like to say how you went from firing at people to firing people. And a lot of people think it's a linear path, and if they didn't take it right away, they're out of luck. But like, you've worked on growing through your whole lifetime. So give us a quick arrival into HR.
Can I go back a step further, just to set the scene before I move into HR? Because I think many of the viewers might like to know just a little bit more. What was my starting point, and what was my drive or my motivation, as it were? Because I left school at 16 and a half, obviously in London, as it were, with no qualifications whatsoever. I had absolutely nothing. Because at 16 and a half, all I wanted to do was play soccer. I mean, I was into swimming, running, playing soccer, and I just thought, well, this is it. I'm going to be a soccer player. I'm going to be famous. But as I tell people, unfortunately, David Beckham got the job, and I had to look for work elsewhere. So, which is almost true in actual fact. So, but at 16 and a half, I mean, there you are, like many 16, 17-year-olds, and you don't really know what's out there. You don't really know, do you need a qualification? You haven't got the wisdom and the foresight to know what's coming up. So I went into banking just to keep me going at the start. It was just a job to get myself rolling. But within about 2 years, I had a frightener. And this is one of the guys if I'm allowed to use the word guys, it was a bloke. One of the guys in the bank was an assistant manager, and he said to me, Victor, I wasn't a doctor at 16 and a half. So, Victor, he said, look, if you do really well, take your banking exams, you can end up like me. And that to me was a frightening thought. I thought, good grief, I'm going to be stuck as an assistant manager, as a bank clerk for the next 30 years?
Backwards.
Well, hang on.
Well, yeah, but I have to interrupt, because before that, like, a lot of people don't realize that in the 1840s, when you went to school,
1740, yeah,
1740,
with Bill Shakespeare.
That's right. You were on 3-day rotations, right? Like, you grew up in an area of London that was pretty rough. Like, there were 3 days at a time, I think, that you actually were in school at the time.
Well, what happened is that was a little bit later, when I'd already left school, as it were, and within a year or two of me leaving school, my younger brothers and sisters, they were basically rationed, because there was so many people coming to the UK that they had to go to school 3 days a week. So you had Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever the mix was. So you got part-time education. So you can imagine, if the standard of the tuition in a high school is that you're teaching to the standard of the lowest person in terms of their academic ability, the persons arriving in the UK at that particular time at a very basic level of English. So therefore, teaching to the standard of the lowest student meant you've got to reteach English, even at 14, 15 and 16.
Which I think is...
So they were behind the 8 ball straight away.
And that's a big systemic issue, which, like, within the kind of, that's a big political immigration kind of conversation, which we're not going to go into right now. But I think it's a really important thing to say. Like, when governments providing education to people, we need to think about that when looking at reducing barriers to entry for everyone, right?
Well, at that time, education was free, even at university. So if you spin right forward now, a lot of people end up with a $100,000 debt. That didn't exist in my time. Education was paid for right up until the end of university.
Right.
So you didn't have this millstone around your neck, that you've got to pay off in the next 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
So very different times, but you learn to adapt to roll with what is going on in your climate or your culture or your country at a particular time. Now, the decision that my parents made was to go to New Zealand. It was going to be New Zealand, Australia, or Canada, with a view to getting my younger brothers and sisters an education which is 5 days a week. That was the bottom line.
Yeah.
But then if I spin forward and just say I did 2.5 years in the bank. And in the bank, as a bank clerk, I mean, I learned this is the way things are done in the bank, which was great because you're starting to mix with, if you like, not so much real people, but you're mixing with people who have got a common goal, which is banking. Now, whether it's serving people, giving them mortgage rates, having a chat about investment portfolios, or even balancing the books, there's a commonality within that field that everyone can share. So you start to develop a certain degree of expertise. But at the age of 18 and a half, to me, I just thought, there's no way I want to be doing this for 25, 30 years. I was already still into the sport, the soccer, the swimming, and all the rest of it. And I asked myself a question. I sat down one day and I just thought, well, what is it I want to do, and what is it I do not want to do? So if I answer the latter part first, I did not want to be a prison officer, for example. That was to me, and okay, I don't want that type of environment. I do not want to be a social worker, because I'm not really an overly touchy-feely... Excuse me? Hey, Raquel, get the hook out there.
I don't want to be a social worker because...
No, because what I'm saying is, if you understand at that stage, do you really want to interact with people on an ongoing basis?
Full stop.
Every single... Or do you prefer the isolation, which is the computer programmer type? And and it'll come back to one of my key points later, is understanding yourself is a really important issue in terms of not only what do I like, but what do I not like, or what do I not appreciate? Because all of those little balances give you a bit of, if you like, a far more well-rounded view as to what is the path or paths that I should embark upon, which is going to keep me happy. Yeah, rather than doing, I have to do this, I have to be accountant because my mum was an accountant or whatever it was.
Well, and that's
anyway,
a good point, Dad, though. Like, your parents, like, you came from a working class family. So none of them had even, I said doctorate earlier, but none of them even had degrees, right? So
but many of them hadn't even finished school.
Right.
Because the war carried on and pulled them straight out.
And so I think that's another really interesting thing, because we nowadays in society, we're talking about generational like barriers, right? Where your parents did this, and so they said to you, here's what you can do, and I know that, you've said a story about your dad being like, you can work on the docks.
As a stevedore, yeah.
As a stevedore, which I don't even know what that is. But
okay.
Sure, it sounds fun. But I think that's really important, because a lot of people today are breaking through those barriers, but they don't know what to do or how to break through those barriers. And you were a really good example to us of someone who the rest of the family, accepted where they were at in their life, but you just kept going. And so I did want you to touch on the Ironman triathlons. I actually, the sedan chair races as well, which was
a sedan chair race. Sorry.
So, okay, this is a little bit of Hong Kong culture for you in like colonial.
We're going off piste here, but
I know, but that's fine. That's where we live, Daddy.
Okay. We live
off piste. But the sedan chair races is a very colonial concept, I would say. So I'm going to caveat it. However, at the time, as a child, and for Dad, like that was what was normal. So, Dad, explain what the sedan chair races were, just so that we're all aware.
It's almost like a carnival atmosphere within Hong Kong. They have the dragon boat race, they have a run around the peak, and then you've got the sedan chair race. And it's an incredibly colourful event. And it's basically it's to raise money for the Matilda Hospital. So women, children, those people that really need it. And a lot of money is raised. To give you an example, you had to be with like a corporate entity, because you're going to pay something like $25,000 or $50,000 entry fee just to participate, and then other people come in. But what you do is you have this sedan chair, which is, if you imagine, you've got 6 people on this chair, all right, carrying this chair with the as light as possible ID card holder, still alive person at the start and the finish, sitting in it, holding on for dear life as you run around this 2.5 mile course. And on the way, it's lined with people. And people, I mean, for example, the hospital team, all the men would be dressed up as nurses, and there'll be Carlsberg drip feeds, beer running into whoever the 100-pound person is. But the whole purpose of it is it's a fantastic event, literally just to raise money for those people that need it within Hong Kong. And that's the event. Very colourful day out.
But very taxing on the people who are running. Like, I just remember as a kid being like 5 years old and being like, my dad and his friends are carrying people around, like running around, and they look ruined, and I have no idea why they're doing it. But after Dad had already been, you had been at that point you'd been a London Bobby was how you started, and then
explain a Bobby. People don't know what a Bobby is.
Named after Robert Peel, who was basically the first police commissioner in about 1839 in the UK. So his name was Peel, and they said, "Oh, these are peelers." But his first name, Bobby, Robert. So they became Bobbies.
So
Kristina, over to you.
Oh, that was good. Yeah, I love London, and England has such amazing history of why they named all the things they did, and how many laws still exist in England. Like the fact that it's actually still illegal. Dad knows this one. I think it's illegal to carry a bale. It's illegal to not carry a bale of hay in your taxi cab. In case the horse needs to eat.
Oh,
it's still technically in the law
on the books.
That it's on the books. It's illegal.
Now you're talking to me.
Yeah, you would love that.
I do love that
horse-loving person. So at that point, Dad, this was the other thing that I did want to highlight to people is your ability to craft your way into things. So you were a London Bobby, and then you joined you had to join the traffic police, because at the time to get into the forces, I don't know, whatever it was next, you tell this story better than I do, but you needed to have 20/20 vision, the only way to get into. So tell us that story, because I think that's really interesting.
Or let me just go back very slightly, okay? Just fractionally.
You do whatever you like, Dad. We're off piste.
Okay, well, because why did I become a police officer? I sat down, asked myself 3 questions. What do I want to do with the rest of my life? And I thought, I really love sport.
That's one question.
Right? I really love driving, okay? It was the second part. And I really love English, in other words, legal, criminal law. If you put all those together, sport, driving, law, police officer. Boom. There you go.
But I love that story because a lot of people aren't born with a calling. We talk about this calling all the time.
It took me 2.5 years to get there.
I think that's really soon because I feel like a lot of people aren't doing that until they're 30, 40, after they've already had a whole,
if at all.
Yeah, they've already done a whole career, and then they're thinking man, I really don't want to continue on with this.
Well, the just adding to that, the sport carried me through everything. Every job I had after that was it. Oh, hi, Victor, do you play soccer? Well, actually, bang, right, we want you in the team. Or join the company. One particular job I got, they said, can you change your preference to this? And I said, well, actually, in Hong Kong, it was, can you change your preference from uniform branch to special branch? And I said, why do you want me in special branch? And they said, we want you on the orienteering team and the soccer team. And I said, so nothing to do with the job? No, forget that. You can do that later. So that I was a paid sportsman.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, if you've got a strong point on that, some people they're actually employed because they play golf.
Yeah.
Or they play golf because somebody on the interview panel says, well, I play the trombone. They say, oh, well, I play the trombone. Oh, you've already got a touch point.
Yeah.
And if you can find those touch points, they'll carry you through because you've got commonality.
And I think that came from true, you really loved your sport. Dad's...
Oh, totally, yeah.
I would never normally say this, but he's being pretty modest right now. Where Dad was he broke records for running, and he was an exceptionally good soccer player. So it wasn't these were the things that my older sister and I talk about this a lot, where I say, oh, I really want to do this. And she was like, that's so great. But other people are telling you what you're amazing at that only you can do. And sometimes you don't have a choice in that. And you don't get to control that. But knowing that you have that can leverage you into certain other things. And I think that's really important. And I think just, going back to the, why you chose to do what you wanted to do and go into the police force, a lot of us don't have enough transparency to see what future careers could look like. I mean, you obviously, when you say it, you're like, oh, I needed to do those 3 things. That's the police.
Yep.
But were there open houses? Like, how did you realize, like, oh, I can totally do that? Did you have friends in the force? Like, how did you know that the police would offer you those three things?
Well, basically, you got advertisements for the Metropolitan Police, which come up in the newspapers very often. And the thing is, on the job description that they put in it, on the job advertisement, it says, join the Metropolitan Police, have a career, study the law, tick.
Okay.
You become a member of the sports club. We have sports facilities at a place called Imber Court. These are massive rugby, swimming, another tick the box there. And you get the opportunity of going to the most famous driving school in the world, Hendon Drive, tick the driving. I thought, wow, this is me.
All I have to do is learn how to shoot guns and fight crime and
no,
all the other stuff.
No, in Metropolitan Police, interestingly enough, as an aside, no guns.
Right.
We had the baton. Okay,
right.
Or as Raquel was at the baton.
The baton.
the baton. So for example, in those days, there were certain rules, even amongst criminals. You never shot a cop because he was never armed.
Right.
All he had was a piece of wood.
And that's an interesting thing with gun culture.
If you compare today,
Yeah.
I mean, it's the cop walked. The policeman was there to help people. I used to work morning. We have community police officers. We'd go into the community. I volunteered at one of the kids' centres as the soccer coach. I just said, hey, they said, look, we've got no one to teach our kids here. And I said, well, I can play soccer reasonably. And they said, oh, can you come up at 6 to 7 o'clock on a Monday night or Tuesday? Well, I said, yeah, sure, no problem. I said, depending on what shift I'm on. And then they had the local school hall, and I just went in there. Okay, let's do some defensive movement. Let's do some chest, some heading. And so there's no payment for this. This is out of our own time.
But so, Dad, let's push that police side of things a little bit further. Because actually, this was the thing. You got into the force, and then you chose to go to Hong Kong, auspiciously. I like to say.
You missed out a bit. But...
I did. But you did the military in New Zealand, right? So you got your whole family into New Zealand first, didn't you? Because they have the $25 ticket? The $25 catch a ferry to New Zealand deal.
It was £8 at the time, but I mean, essentially I went across as a traffic police officer. But no, I paid my own way because I didn't want to be obliged to stay for 2 years. So they joined me, and then they got their full-time schooling. Right. What happened there is, while I was in New Zealand, I thought, I've missed out on my military service, and in New Zealand it was compulsory just before I arrived. And I thought, if I wanted to become a New Zealander, so in essence, if I want to fit in, I should do what everyone else at my age has done. So I'm not exempt, and I'll do the same thing. So I went down to a place called Waiouru. In the infantry, I did my 3 months of basic training. Then when I came out, I joined the traffic police. And this is what you mentioned before, because my glasses were 618, and not 612. So, which was weird, because a traffic policeman, you have to be 21 years of age, and you can only ride motorcycles and all the rest of it. Whereas if you're a policeman, you can be 18. So I didn't quite get that, but after 3 years, I got bored. And then I decided, okay, the family are all sorted out. Where do I want to go? And in the colonies at the time, Antigua had just closed down. Bermuda was open to me, if you'd done at least 2 years in the Metropolitan Police, or Hong Kong. So I just thought, hey, Hong Kong, learn a language, go there for 3 years, see how it goes.
But still in the police force.
Yeah.
Okay.
I became an inspector of police.
But
because of my service. Yeah.
But when you went into traffic, what was the rule at the time where you had to have 20/20 vision? So that was your way to get into the police.
No. I couldn't get into the police in New Zealand. I was refused 3 times. I was refused from England. They said, look, your eyesight's not quite there. And, of course, you couldn't have contact lenses.
Right.
Laser surgery was not invented in 1645. So, well, in actual fact, a horrible story. Some of the people, in terms of laser surgery, they didn't have it. They used to grind your irises down.
Stop.
Don't say that, Daddy.
Ooh. Hang on a second. A bit wobbly here.
Have you done laser eye surgery since? That's good.
No. Who are you? I can't see you. No, I didn't.
Never did it.
The thing was, in Hong Kong accepted 618. So my eyesight is 618. So
you were good.
It's so weird that it's it's just such a weird thing.
In the Metropolitan Police, if your eyesight deteriorates, you were allowed to wear police issue glasses.
Oh.
So they're all plastic. So
you're like grandfathered in.
Visor.
Yeah.
You are, if you're in. Yeah, but I couldn't do it in New Zealand, so I'd be a traffic cop. Then I went to Hong Kong. Eyesight was okay. I used to wear glasses, and you become automatically an inspector of police.
And so you went to Hong Kong, and then the story of applying for the special forces and the rigorous training that you had to go, and the selection process for that was pretty intense, right? Like you had to go through like sleep deprivation training things and training. I don't know. I'm squishy. I had a bougie life compared to Dad.
All right, just to
Yeah.
the special forces there are basically the anti-terrorist unit, and people that have got over 3 to 5 years service are allowed to apply. But it's the same as the SAS. It is essentially the SAS selection course, but based in Hong Kong. And I was fortunate enough in the group of people that applied for this job. I was the one that was selected, and every year we are trained by the equivalent of the SAS or the Special Boat Squadron, which is the equivalent to Navy SEALs. So anyhow, yeah.
So going that.
But wait. What are the lessons from that? What do we learn from that?
What did we learn?
Okay, now the interesting thing, if I can make a link to the past, SAS type training, just to put it in the common vernacular, and the sleep deprivation and all the rest of it, is physical and it's mental. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then you've got the technical knowledge on the side. Now everyone's got the technical knowledge if you're in the police already, yeah, or even if you're in the military. But the 2 weeks of getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, running 20 miles with 100-pound packs or 50-pound packs, and really it's a little bit of a party trick. Now, if you're fit, and remember, I was incredibly fit anyway. 200 sit-ups, 100 push-ups, no problem. So therefore, every time we went, they said, we're going to do a 10-mile run. I mean, I was basically recovering. It was a joke to me. But for some people who are not used to that could cripple them. So therefore, when you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning, well, I used to train for marathons by getting up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to go for a 15-mile run. So I was almost in my element to actually go through the selection process. So I was fortunate enough to be able to say, this is not going to tax me. If you are physically fit, there is less impact on the mental demands, as it were. And I suppose, even if I jump forward and come back to business, if you are healthy, you can undertake the task as fitness, because I would actually say there's a big difference between being healthy and being fit. I mean, maybe we'll come to that later. But again, if you understand yourself, which was my earlier point, if you understand your own ability, you know when to back off, you know when to push, you know when to study harder, you know when to have a rest day, or you should do, unless you miscalculate. And the miscalculation normally comes with either bravado, not understanding yourself, or just trying to not be embarrassed and let me show people I can do it. So you have to be very, very careful of knowing your own limitations and just edge, if you like, a little bit. So coming back to sort of the SAS type of training, I knew all about it before I even went in. I mean, I was studying Green Beret books. I was going through the regimes. I had all the books out. Okay, they can do 50 press-ups, so I'll do 60. They can do 200 push-ups, I'll do 250. So I was just making sure that when I went in, I was not going to be, physically bound by some of the problems that the normal person would face.
And when you did go through really difficult times, was there any mental games that you kind of learned to play with your brain to get you through those difficult times?
Yeah, I think when you're physically pushing yourself out and you're losing huge amounts of weight, as it were, you start to hallucinate. And what tends to happen is you don't know it's a hallucination. You just think, oh wow, this is who's that godlike figure floating around in the distance, and you think, there should be a godlike figure on this nature path,
Steve?
with me carrying a pack.
Is that you,
So
Steve?
therefore you think, hey, Brian. so then you think, hey, there's something a little bit untoward here. I mean, I'm being very polite here. And then you say to yourself, back off. Back off a little bit. I mean, they're just, and you learn these little telltale signs. I mean, some people might say, I'll start getting tingly in the arm, or some people might say, oh, my neck starts to hurt, or I'm feeling incredibly thirsty, or I can taste ginger, or whatever it is. Oh. You learn this over your own time frame. I mean, I'll give you another example. When I used to do all my runs, I would forever use a heart rate monitor. And the reason for the heart rate monitor is because it tells me what I'm doing and if I'm going over the limit without even knowing. And many times I'd say I want to train between about 130 and 150 tops, as it were. And I'd set my limits on that, and then it'd go beep, 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 beep. Oh, what am I doing? I'm at 155.
Yeah.
So, okay, back off a bit. And then you start running down here. Beep, 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 beep. Now, if you didn't do that, basically you are overtraining without realizing it. And the recovery for the next aim is you can't do what you really wanted to do. So you end up potentially, overdoing it without realizing it. Just give you one other comment on this. Whenever I was getting the flu or a cold or something like, I go for a run and I think, what's my heart rate? Oh, 138. Normally it should be 126. So I just, hey, back off. Something's wrong. You've got a flu bug coming up or something like that. So again, understanding yourself, knowing your limitation, and this only comes in time. When do you drink in a marathon? And, of course, I've done so many of them that now I know. I just think, look, take the water. Yeah, but I'm not thirsty. No, but you know from experience that this is when you should take it. And you've got your milestones, 2 miles, 4 miles, 8 miles, and it's all marked. Or there's aid stations. So you use that to compartmentalize, how am I doing? What should I be doing? And you listen to your body, or you listen to your plan, and you don't go literally off-piste. I'm feeling great, and just carry on.
Well, this is what I wanted to tie into the mental side of things, because, I want to go back to, I love the analogy of you can be fit and not healthy and vice versa as well. So I do want to go back to that. But skipping forward for a bit to the business side of things, that training gave you so much perspective to begin with, but then also when you started looking at, I remember growing up and you being really, really clear on your boundaries and knowing where you are and what you do mentally as well. So you've spoken about the physical side, but for people who are, let's say, not in as extreme 11-time Ironman triathlon mode, which is just excessive, Daddy. Yes, finished them. Good job.
It should say finished.
Finished, complete. But those, that's transferable into the mental side of things as well, and a lot of people nowadays more than ever, and you've seen me do it so many times. You've actually called me and said, Chris, you're running towards burnout. I can see that it's happening. This is what, and what would you say to people who are, they might be physically fit, they might have a good process in terms of how to keep fit / healthy. We'll talk about that in a minute. But mentally, what did you do when there were people who would say to you, for example, I know when someone said, you can't join this corporation this company because you don't have a degree. You can't do this because
he laughs.
He knows exactly what I'm talking about. And Dad is very stubborn, but there's a big part of being really adamant that you know what's good for you. And I think that's one thing that I think for me, I've had a lot of imposter syndrome in my life, and Dad's had to kind of coach me through that feeling and reassure me, but it never seems to have been something that was an issue for you. So you've never had that problem, and I want to know why, and I want to know how to extract that from your brain now.
Okay, let me set the scene, because it is an interesting story, and I do often relate it. And if you go back to leaving school at 16 and a half and having no qualifications, And then all of a sudden, you so go fast forward by about 10 years, and all of a sudden, I'm a chief inspector of police in the Royal Hong Kong Police Force. So you've got this rank, you're a captain, basically. Well, how'd you get there? And of course, the answer is, well, I got there on the back end of knowing the law in England, being a cop, being in the military, which is almost a party trick if you've done it, 3 times already. But then all of a sudden, what I decided is, do I really want to stay here? Because in Hong Kong, I'd risen through the ranks, and I was retaking examinations which I'd already taken before 3 times, because it's all English law, it's all English criminal law. So I learned everything by heart. But I went to the Foreign Office, if you like, which is the New Zealand Commission, and I applied for a job there. And I knocked on the counter and I said, "Hello there, I'd like to. I see you got an advertisement here to join the New Zealand Commission as a diplomat." And I said, "How do I join?" And the first thing this person said to me is, "Do you have a degree?" And I said, "No, I don't have." And I said, "No, I don't have a degree." And they jumped in and said, "Oh, well, you can't join." And I said, "Well, no, hang on a sec." I said, "I'm a chief inspector of police. I speak Cantonese. I've already got 2 grades of this. I've passed all my examinations with flying colours, literally with honours." And they said, "Do you have a degree?" And I said, "Well, no." They said, "Well, you can't join." So I said, "Okay, oh, sorry." I said, "Yeah, I have a degree." And she said, "Oh, what's your degree in?" And I said, "Ceramics." Because one of our colleagues, who was also an inspector, he had his degree in ceramics. We used to call him Desert Head, just to share this with you, because he was bald at 24. But anyway, that's an aside. But it might come up in the exam later. So anyway, Desert Head, okay, I hope he's listening. He said he's got his degree in pottery, ceramics. So I said, I've got a degree in ceramics. And she said, "Oh, well, that's okay. Then you can join." And I said, "What's that got to do with it?" And they said, I said, "Look, I haven't got a degree." They said, "Oh, you can't join me." So what? I have a degree. So I said, "Okay, fine." So then I said, so I went off. I was 27, and as Kristina says, the next 20 years was getting. I thought, right, how clever do you have to be to get a degree? And
pretty clever, Dad. You have to be pretty clever, as it turns out.
It's being told you cannot do something, that there is this milestone or this obstacle. Now, I didn't have the gumption, the option, as it were, nor the motivation to get a degree at the age of 16 and a half or whatever it was. But this person suddenly said, "You can't join here because you haven't got a degree in ceramics."
Just pissed him off.
Or bunny hopping or macrame. Anyway, so then I went off and I thought, right, I can do this. But then I didn't, and then the other thing is here, I used to get up at 6 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning to study. And then, the kids came along, as it were, and I'd still be studying as well. And the reason, because if I tried to study at 6 or 7 o'clock at night, I'd just fall asleep. So for the next 10 years, I used to do part-time study at the local university in Hong Kong, or I'd do it by distance learning.
So how good is your ceramic skills now?
Let me have a look for my mug. I ended up with a degree, and then after that, because I ended up in personnel wing, just jumping forward in the police. And what I did in personnel wing, I thought, I'm in personnel wing, but I've got no background other than being a cop. So I decided, I thought, okay, I'll go to Hong Kong University and get a certificate in personnel management, because at least it'll give me the theory. And then while I was doing that, and I met Kristina's mum, and we decided to do the Diploma in Management Studies, which was a 2-year evening course. So I got the certificate, then I got the diploma.
Wait.
I had to get the diploma because you have to have a diploma before you can do a degree.
Oh, but Mum sounds like my path.
But Mum aced that, so Dad basically found someone who was better than him at everything.
Which is true, and I hope she's not going to watch this. But actually, I'll admit it. No, but she is. She used to write letters during finance exams, and that she just understood it. So, but then what I did is, then I did the degree, and then I thought, when I was in HR, as it so, just jumping forward, every time somebody applied for a job, because I was in personnel wing, I said, "Who do we want for this particular job?" This was like Interpol. Okay, who do we want? Oh, they've got to have a degree and they've got to have 4 years experience or another job in CID training. Okay, criminal investigation department. Okay, they need a degree and they're going to... So every time this degree kept coming up. And I thought, well, those are pretty commonplace now. How am I going to differentiate myself? So I just finished the degree, literally. I thought, I better get a master's degree to bury this, to show me one-upmanship. So a colleague of mine said, hey, because at that stage, he was in training and development. And he said, we have a budget for this. So I thought, ooh, budget,
Nice.
good. So then I did a 2-year master's degree, and then I got on an internal program and did an MBA. And so it carries on. But I won't bore you with that.
And then the doctorate.
And then I decided, because most people then, so I had a degree, 2 master's degrees, and I thought, what's next? And my colleague said, well, I'm going to go and get a doctorate. And I thought, oh, well, if he gets one, I can't live in the shade. Plus, the other thing is because I'd been studying for so long, it was easier to read through the books. Mm-hmm. You know, I hadn't gone back to school, 15 years earlier, which I've got people in my class that are now doing. I went straight into the doctorate, and I'm still raising the family, I'm still working full-time, and I'm trying to do my doctorate as well. I moved 3 countries over the 8-year period, and then finally I got my doctorate, and it was all in teaching and learning. It was a doctorate in education from the University of Leicester. So, yeah.
Christina's...
That was the worst.
And then I had to get certain people to proofread it, and it doesn't cure insomnia. Unfortunately, it puts you to sleep.
What I want to know is, could your daughters lie to you? Because you have this whole policing background. Did you create really good liars, or could they just not ever get away with lying?
Well, I would. Again, there's a few there. I would say 75 to 80% of the time I knew when they were lying, and it was either in their facial expression, in their eyebrows, or the way they held their head, which is like where Kristina is on sideways at the moment. And then, but the fatal mistake I used to make is I'd say to Mrs. T and say to my wife, I said, "This is a shocking excuse. I mean, I used to do that when I was a kid." I said, "But the difference was I never got caught." So they were, but I would also say when you've got 3 daughters, being a dad, you are extra protective as well. So, and I would always say to the girls, look, we're not talking male or female, you just got to be better. That's it. So whatever it needs to do, and whatever it takes, just be better. And I can help you wherever you want.
Just be better.
And that's it. Just be better. So if the boys are training 2 hours a day, you better put in a 2 1/4. Do not, I mean, we used to, Kristina and I would have a joke. We'd be going for a run, and then she'd be behind me, and I'd say, "Oh, okay, so you know your place."
Yeah, he used to rile me.
But the thing was, because my point was, do you really want to follow behind someone? Forget the male or female bit. I mean, do you always want to be...
Because I would naturally go behind him.
Go for it.
When the reality is, I'm just wanting for someone to get eaten first if the bear jumps out.
No snakes. As the snakes in Hong Kong. But it proved a point, because every time I would say it, what I was saying to is, it's not a respect thing. It's, you can do this. Let's push some limits. So go for it.
And that limit pushing, I think, is the really big thing. As so many of our friends and the people that we interact with, everyone that's listening and watching, so many people are caged by themselves. They're caged by their own feeling. And Dad, you and I have had this conversation, and I've had you as my dad, and I say that as well. Like, I've had Mum as my mum and Dad as my dad, and still I go into rooms and I'm like, I don't feel like I belong here. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to make that bigger ask. I don't know how to take that next step up. And I think that leads us to the conversation surrounding entrepreneurship, whether it's accidental or, intentional and purposeful. But, a huge element of being an entrepreneur and a solopreneur is that people miss out on that leadership training. They miss out on that kind of, like in the corporate world. I know Dad used to always run these training and development courses, and I used to be like, oh, maybe I should be in, work for Jardines, because then I get to do these management development courses that are paid for. But what about these people who are creatives, who are entrepreneurial, but they don't have any guidance? Like, what would be, for those who haven't gone through an executive leadership course, how
can they gain those skills?
Yeah, how can you help someone understand where to go looking for that? Yeah, full stop. That's a full stop.
No, and it's a very. I think questioning yourself is valid. And again, I have to bring age into this, age and experience. Again, we come back to this platform of understanding yourself and your own capabilities and pushing. And what I like to see, I'll give you an example here. When I was looking at resumes from a HR perspective, and this is when I was in, HR director for many multinational companies, and I would look at them, and I'd get sometimes people would be doubting themselves. They say, I said, oh, you haven't got any hobbies or interest here. Oh, I was told to take it off. And I said, well, okay, just tell me, what are your hobbies and what are your interests? And one of them said, I love dancing, or I love music. And to me, that resonated with me, because as soon as you say that, you bring in a discipline element. You bring a perseverance element. You bring in enthusiasm to it. I know what your drivers are. And if I'm in an organization that every 6 months we have a band or a contest, or there's a fit straight away. And all you've done is by removing that, because somebody has said, maybe quite unrealizingly, well, don't put your interest or the hobbies because it might act against you. Now, the only restriction I would say is that if you write down, what are your hobbies, and you say Ironman triathlon, well, people say, well, hang on a sec, the person's going to have no time and they're going to be tired to do. So you might want to just
get the job.
Swimming.
Get the job fast.
But if you're interested in learning languages, if you're interested in, even if it would be knitting, even if it's in macrame, even if it's pottery per se, there is a certain discipline there, which is you. It means that you can focus. There are touch points, there are motivational points, there are buttons that could be pushed which are going to excite you. So if you say, let's say, for example, it's music, well, and you like HR, I would say, and Kristina knows this, so well, get a job in HR, but make sure it's in the music industry. Okay, you want to play sport. Okay, well, what about some discipline services, and tell them that you're a soccer player or a rugby player or you're a runner or you're a hiker or you're a coach of Little League Soccer. Because people can then start to relate and add worth to you, rather than I went to school for 5 years, I worked at, Safeway supermarket for 2 years. This is nothing about you. Those are too generic. And as a HR person, again, if I may, I used to get, let's say, for example, 100 resumes. And I'd get this, and I'd say to the contracts manager, what's your criteria? First thing they say, got to have a Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering. So there's the degree straight away. So that's 80% of all the resumes gone straight away. And I said, well, what else is next? Oh, maybe a master's degree, but they've got to have at least 4 years experience. Now, you're looking at about 32 years of age by the time you've gone through that motion. But now I'm down to 10. Now, that's a manageable amount. And then if I said, well, what do you want? We want them to have civil engineering and foundation work experience. Okay, I've got 3 here, I've got both of those. So I'm down to interviewing 3 people. So what I'm saying here is the connection between the job advertisement, the job description, what is it you're supposed to do, and the job specification. This is what are your abilities, your skills, and your knowledge. You need to fit those to each and every application that you've got. Otherwise, you're doing yourself an injustice.
And I think that when it comes back to entrepreneurship, and, because a lot of people, like Dad, this, we talk about this a lot, where people are like, oh, I don't really need a resume. I haven't done a resume in 10 years, or, whatever that is. A lot of creative entrepreneurs, I think, they miss out on, going back to that entrepreneurial corporate support and the management support, is if you do exactly what Dad has said, as in audit all of these skills and your knowledge and your loves of what you love to do, and you put that onto a resume, you have a way clearer picture of what you are actually capable of doing and qualified for. And that takes away, for me personally, a lot of my imposter syndrome. If I call it metric hunting, Dad probably calls it something much more official than that. But I'm like, if you have numbers where you say, not just I worked at a restaurant, you know, for example, we talk about this on resumes all the time, Dad. Like, so many people say, I worked at Earl's. Someone from South Africa doesn't know what Earl's is, right? Yep. But if you say, I worked at a 500-seat restaurant serving up to 2,000 people per day. I was responsible for over $10,000 in cash. I was responsible to train a team of 12 people on a regular basis, attend weekly meetings. I have just dropped 5 points of like number points that someone can objectively attach to. So going back to that entrepreneurial, you know, when people don't get management training or entrepreneurship training, the free thing you can do is build your resume and actually
have a highlight journal. That was a game changer for me. I did it 1 year and I should have kept doing it because I'm saying how great it was, and it really was. But I kept a highlight journal, and I was like, you know what? I'm just really curious, because when I'm asked upon, I can never remember the things that I've done. I'm like, I worked on some stuff and it was great, because I'm a very goal-oriented person. So once it's done, it's out of my life. I don't think about it again. So I just kept a highlight journal. It was just in a regular old notebook at home. I would come home at the end of the day and just write something in, whatever it was. By the end, I couldn't believe the stuff I did. And I was looking at this. I was so proud of myself. I'm like, wow. And it makes such a huge difference. And Kristina, you and I have talked about doing that with Bombshells, starting to record everything that we're doing.
I completely agree with you there. Again, my HR days, not only in HR, but as a manager, we'd go through the annual performance appraisal. And you'd say to a person, hey, look, fill out this sheet, you know, a couple of days before, and then we'll talk about it. And as you say, you think, well, what have I done? I haven't really done it. The same old, same old. But if I just switch now to a resume, and on your resume you say, worked at this place, and then you put down major achievement. What was it? You know, next place, major achievement, or what were your accountabilities and responsibilities? But your diary there, I mean, I have it on I've got a desk diary over here, and all my CPD, or my continuing professional development, is there, so that when I have to, at the end of a year, what have you done, how many days have you done this, it's easy to put it in. But what you've also just said, when you've done something really good, for example, it may be, I got a compliment from a customer today, who really praised my attitude. And if you put that in your book, when it comes to as you say, at the end of the year, you know, and somebody said, what have you got? Oh, well, I've had 4 compliments. You know, I've had only 1 complaint, which was unsubstantiated. But in terms of the metrics, this is what I've done. And all of a sudden, your boss is going, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
And you're protecting yourself as well by saying, I'm interested in me. Let me tell you what I've done really well. Because as you probably know, people always remember the complaints, the negative, and they don't put in the positive. Well, why not?
That note-taking came from, I think, you used to always say this to me, that the note-taking came from the police, where you'd always have to keep a notebook. And like notebooks, like my little notebooks, our whole lives have been notes and treasure hunts and like Can
I hold one up too?
Little notebooks, and that's your police. Like, you record everything that happens, and even a lot of your colleagues, Dad, as you went into the corporate world from the police world, you had a lot of friends who went as well, and Mr. Bent was one of them, and he used to have the same. He used to have a diary of everything that would happen, because if someone came in and said, oh no, you said this, he would literally open his page. I hope I'm telling this story correctly, Dad. He would open this page and be like, actually, no, I have a note on this date. This is what you said.
How much did people hate him? I bet.
No, the opposite.
They absolutely loved him. He was the HR director for Jardine Matheson, which is about 500,000 people worldwide. He is, and he's an ex-cop like me, same background, but he would say, the way he would say things, let's say, for example, like Kristina has just said there, no, hang on a sec, we never agreed to this. He would say, well, hang on a sec, you may be right here, but let me check. No, I made a note of what you said, and actually what you said was, is that right?
Yeah, whereas
very diplomatic.
Dad would flip a table and be like, bugger off, you're a liar.
I would say, what are you on about? No. But I mean, so there's the nuances as well. I mean, if you're sitting there, the person, is a person, as it were, and they may genuinely not remember it. I know, but Richie, at the end of the day, this is like making your to-do list, which I always used to do at the end of a day, because I learned this because otherwise people would leave the office. Let's say you're leaving at 7 o'clock, for example. I would say you spend 10 minutes. What is it you're supposed to do in the first 15 minutes to half an hour tomorrow? And you just make a note of it and you leave it on your desk. Then you go home and you can sleep, because you know that there is a list on your desk.
Yeah.
Versus not doing it, going home and, I must remember to do that tomorrow. I must remember to do that.
Yeah.
So this, if you like, this structure, this process, this habit, as it were, like you mentioned there, a little bit of diary taking. We're not talking about pages. No. We're talking about do yourself a favour, be complimentary, say something nice about what you did this week.
Yeah.
And I was in the habit, and I still am. I write it down as soon as it happens, and then I close the page, and then I move on.
I call it you have a captain's log for our team, and I've been using it in Career Pathways, and it's just 4 headings. It's career, existence, home and admin, and takeaways. It's just those 4 things, and the coaching is actually not about filling that in however you want. It's about filling it in as specifically as you can. And that helps to train you for the vocabulary that you can use on your resume. And I think that the resume goes so many different ways. It's the most boring piece of paper to most people when they think about it. But the reality is, when you have it, you have talking points for your interview. You have already taken the time out to put your thoughts onto a page and organize them, which means that you're not second guessing yourself. And with the captain's log in combination, it means that when you do start to write your covering letter, I can't believe I'm going to say this, you can use the learning triangle of describing. Dad, you can, this is Dad's stuff.
I'm assuming this is Dr. T.
This is the stuff of nightmares. The learning triangle, which allows you to then not only say, this is what I did, this is, what are the 3? It's, you say it. I don't want to. It hurts me.
Well, I mean, Raquel, this may help you in terms of your studies. And I've been complimented many times on this for giving people a form of structure and a form of focus. Essentially, if you've got a triangle, basically you've got theory at the top, you've got practice on the left-hand side, on the corner, and then you've got reflection. Those are the 3. And in the middle, this is all about transference of learning. So if I was to ask you now, how do you learn? Now, what I would say is, if you're an academic learner, you learn by reading the book, the theory, which is the top part. Other people say, no, I've got to have a go. I've got to do it. Let me have a go and do it, which is the practical part. But then where a lot of students and a lot of people, even in management, miss out, they don't sit down and reflect on it. I mean, I've got to be doing something meaningful, rather than, let me just think about how that works. Because theory informs practice, practice informs theory, theory informs... And so that's how the world has gone on. Now, when you want to transfer learning, as it were, what do? You read a little bit of the book, and then you go and have a go. Didn't work, read a little bit of the book, or go watch a YouTube video again, have a go, reflect, did that work? No. So you're continually bouncing in those 3 dimensions. And what I used to say I still say to my students now, they say, look, we've read the book, but we don't understand how it works. And I said, well, okay, where do you work? Where do your parents work? Oh, they work in superstore. So bang, I'll immediately give an example. Okay, that theory, in terms of operations management, this is what it means. And they say, oh, well, I don't understand that. Well, what do you do? Oh, I'm a sports person. Okay, here's a sporting example. And I immediately translate it from theory into practice. And I get it.
I think like a graduate student. That's a big difference. But that's the huge difference that I've experienced too, going into my master's, is a huge part of what you don't do in your undergrad is the reflection. Now, all of a sudden, all of the learning, all of the practical you do on your own totally separately, and then you come together as a small group and you reflect, and that's that added component. And I hands down agree with you. I think it makes a huge difference.
Well, the big thing I say to undergraduate students is, even the reflection part, is I say, in your textbook, I mean, any textbook, it will have practice in there as well. They say, this is Air Canada. This is Arnold Palmer Hospital. This is Hard Rock Cafe. So you're already being given practical examples, but it's the stickiness, if I use one of my terms as well. What is it that resonates with you? Now, if I said, okay, let me give you an example in regards to podcasts, in terms of supply chain management. Okay, which is another subject I teach. Okay, who's going to teach you who's going to get you the microphones? Where are you going to get the best deal from? Who do you know who can advise you on the technical parts and what sort of research, what are the keywords that you can use to enable your learning? And okay, and you don't say any more than that, because otherwise it's information overload. But the book will give you examples, but then you need to translate it yourself. And then later you go into what you've described as the reflection, where you say, well, actually, my dad works in a blueberry farm, and I can relate in terms of supply chain management when we get late deliveries and we've got blueberries ready to pick and they're all going bad.
And that demonstrates the understanding, right? Like that, and this is where I'm going back to, like, just looping it back to entrepreneurs, to creatives, to people who are running their own businesses. And actually, for me, when I'm helping people with their covering letters, and I'm like, that you can't just say, I have these skills. There's no way for someone to understand that you have those skills. You can't just write like, you can say I have a degree, because that tells them that you stuck it out and an accredited organization gave you a piece of paper that said that you stayed there for 4 years. That's essentially all that is. So if you can't do that with subjective things or entrepreneurial things, like when you're trying to pitch for a new client, you look for a new client, you need to say not only, I know how to run a 200-person event, right? You have to be able to say, I know how to run a 200-person event because I ran 50 of these for this company in this area, and what I learned from it was this, which is why I'm capable of doing work with your client and your agency or whatever it is, because they are interested in this, and this is how I've done it. That reflection is the hook. The reflection in my mind is, this is what I know the theory is. This is like of me being able to achieve this thing. This is how I've done it, and this is why it's relevant to you.
Or even taking that a little bit of a step further. I know when I was working for myself, I would always look at the company I was pitching to and take what I could from them. So these are the values I see in your company. I might not be totally correct, but from what I see, this is what I'm pulling out. This is how I think this can be applied. And if you can pull it just that like little bit further, people are so happy. And we've been, it makes a difference.
Well, those are your touch points, and those are your links, or those are your hooks. And again, if I come back to just talking about resumes, as it were, and entrepreneurial resumes as well, I used to say to people, resumes, 2 pages. Any more than that, I'm not going to read it. I haven't got time. All right. So therefore, it needs to be impressive. And I used to have again from Mr. Bent, I used to have this bold paragraph. What is it about yourself that you really want us to know? That's the first, up front and centre paragraph. But then I saw one from an entrepreneur, which was really good. And what this entrepreneur did is they had a pie chart. And in the pie chart, basically it said, here's what I've done in my life. And it was 20% this, 30% this, 40% different colours, so colour-coded. But there you are, and then it was explained further down.
I like that.
And then you think, wow, why? Because why is it word after word after word after good night, and you're an entrepreneur. So there would be, either there was a little pie chart, now you could read it, but the whole idea of the pie chart, first of all, and a little bar graph as well, was, how much time have you spent in terms of operations? How much time have you spent in terms of marketing? How much time have you spent in terms of HR, which is HR and innovation? And how much time have you spent in terms of finance? Now, those 4 areas are running a business. The course in a business course is made up of those 4 component parts. When you run a small business as an entrepreneur, those are the 4 component parts. If you put that in there, you've got all aspects covered. In addition, by going through the process, if you say, I only spend about 13% or 15% on finance, my comment would be, get yourself a good accountant. That 15% is, do you understand budgets? Do you understand cash flow? Focus on the small but and pay a professional.
Yeah.
All right. If your goal really is marketing, 70% on marketing, hey, great. But at least you've admitted it. You understand yourself. You know the areas. If you take like a SWOT analysis, where are the strengths? Where are the weaknesses? Where are the opportunities and the threats? And you capture it in such a way that a person looking at that resume says, wow, this is different. It's not just word after word after word.
And I think,
do yourself justice.
Yeah, that resume is, again, I keep saying it and I don't know why, but I just like getting that together really, really gives you a landing, a foundation for you to then create your pitch. If it's to bring in new clients or if it's to hire employees, where you're like, here's what we really stand for. This is what I'm good at. This is what I better hire in my team, right? Right? So like, again, this is what I mean about, I know I say this because I nerd out so hard about resumes and I spend so much time helping people with them, and Dad has helped me figure out those initial templates before I even started doing this. But as I've started moving forward with this, I've realized more and more that this is the confidence tool for every single person in their career, regardless of what size industry they're in, what size company they're in, what position they're in, you know.
But I think also, I will say one note, and I'm curious if you guys have any resources on where people can go to help them on this. I think a lot of people, especially when they're young, they don't know the right way to sell themselves. They don't know the right verbiage. They don't know what they don't know, and they don't know how sellable their skills are. They might think, well, everybody who's in marketing or who's an artist has these skills, so what's unique about me? And they should know what these skills are so they don't express it in the proper ways. So where can they go to look up those skills?
That's the systemic issue.
Yeah.
Dad? Hire one of us.
Okay. No, I've taught HR, if you like, at Quantum before, and I used to teach it in pretty high-powered strategic workshops as well. You're quite right, Raquel, in terms of what you say. You don't know what you don't know. And early on, when you are 18, 19, you don't even know where to start. So people are saying, give me a template. Now, I would say we're coming back to the rule of 3. You're going to have to do it 3 times. Okay, you do it the first time, and you've got to get someone to look at it and just say, and give you, pretty sound, even almost obnoxious advice. So then you draft it again the second time, and then you send it out, and people look at it and they kick it around a little bit, and then the third time of doing it, you're on the right, or you're on the righter track. But you can't go from 1 to 3. Yeah. You've got to go through that process, which is, it's back to the learning triangle. Here's the theory from a book or from a website. Have a go, let somebody else have a look at it. But then you've got to reflect on it. Yeah. And as you've just pointed out there, and this is where I differentiate between a resume and a cover letter. I say, like for me, after about 10, 15 years, my resume was about 6 pages because there was so much on there. But when I applied for a particular position, I'd knock it down to 2 pages of the most relevant terms. My cover page is only ever 1 page.
Yeah.
And that is a digest of what's in the first paragraph. It's always 3 paragraphs. The first one is thanking them for the job and highlighting what the position is and the attributes that they've listed. The second part is listing out exactly what you've done in terms of each of those attributes and why you should get the job. And the third paragraph is, having met much of the criteria, really like to have the opportunity to explain to the potential employer how it would be the best fit between you and that person. 3 paragraphs, same thing, 1 page.
And
but sorry, just coming back to where do you go for that? You've got to mess around. There is so much information nowadays on writing of resumes. Or if you're in a college, Quantum, for example, they have an entire department of HR, and they will help you write resumes. And the great thing about Quantland, I know I'm plugging Quantland, but is they'll say, okay, who's benefited from this? And then they'll use alumni or people who have graduated from third year to look at first year's resume, because you've got credibility. You've got this third year student saying to a first year student, I've been there. I know you don't know what you're looking at because it's exactly the same as what I did. Let me give you my 2 years of advice that you haven't got at the moment.
Yeah.
So the credibility coming from that third, fourth year student is gold dust. And then after that, then you start having a go, playing around with it 3 times.
I think, and I would agree with that. I think the thing that's frustrating for me is that I've probably written and helped people to write hundreds of resumes and covering letters, and had extreme success with them, like that more than I would have thought of, But with the covering letter, to add to that, to me, the covering letter you do not copy and paste a covering letter.
No.
You basically say, you go into the website, you go to find out as much as you can about that company, what they believe in, all their values, you get their buzzwords, you get their tone of voice, because at the end of the day, people can choose to hire someone who is qualified to do the position, or they can choose someone who fits their culture, and their company culture is the most important thing, more than ever, as we move into an age of machine learning, digital, exponential increases in technology and the apps that are available to more and more people, and still not enough people around the world, but accessibility is increasing to technology. So when you look at the human skills, people more and more need to know how you fit into their culture, not how you qualify for that role.
Okay.
The other thing I'll say is, the final thing I would say then on that point, is that a lot of people, and Dad, you would probably agree with me, a lot of these people who are putting out these job descriptions, they don't often know what they want. They've copied and pasted it, or they have given a bucket list dream position that they've just made up, that you have 10 years experience and a doctorate and a master's
for $30,000 a year.
For $30,000 a year, and yet of those people, with the people who I've put up for those positions and helped and coached them and mentored them through those applications, have not had nearly the number of qualifications that that the employer had asked for, and they got the job.
So go for it, I guess, is the advice on that. Go for it if you think you're a good fit. But that also leads me into fit, because that's a big thing I wanted to talk about today, is culture fit, and also how to cultivate community in your departments as a leader. How do you do that? I don't know. Dr. T, do you have anything on that end?
All right. Cultural fit on leadership. Let me just go back very slightly. I just want to add a final comment on resumes and cover letters. With cover letters, they are, as Kristina's described, they are a positional fit, okay? Or it's proper positional prose, as it were, and they are geared right directly towards how I fit within the culture of this organization. Excuse me. But the resume, the only other thing I would say, especially within social media, some people say upload your resume, and of course this is just a keyword search. So in your resume, if you haven't got leadership ability or something that alludes to that, or financial, and if it says financial expertise and you say financial bravado, it won't pick it up. So you need to understand what is the algorithm that's being used to search. And sometimes it might be from a HR package, it might say we need at least 6 hits on some of these, otherwise bin it. So, and I'm terribly sorry, but your application was unsuccessful. You've got no idea why. And it may well be that scan of, like spell check, thesaurus, and, word check, or what, you didn't pick up those words.
Finance unicorn.
So again, well,
finance
are you allowed to say unicorn?
Finance unicorn.
No, but and if a person has used that, and as Kristina has said, sometimes the words used, you think, well, that's not a shop assistant, master's degree, and you think, well, hang on a sec, but so then I would look at well, is there a management training program here? Do they have one? Do your research. Because if you're a graduate applying for that position, you might say, I want to get in. I just want to get exposure to the interview. And then you start asking meaningful questions. You say, well, okay, I don't mind doing that for, say, 3 months, but then would I be eligible for your management training program? And then all of a sudden, you're showing that you've looked behind the scenes rather than just slamming in, a resume.
The number of times...
sorry, I just wanted...
That's a good point, though, Dad. The number of times I've seen resumes where people are like, I would really love to come and work at entirely the wrong organization that I work at. I am really interested in applying for this job that is not the job. And I am not Steve.
Well, the only other thing I would say, if it's a large organization, and this is a comment I would make about entrepreneurs. Sorry,
no, this is good.
I haven't forgotten your question. Is sometimes if entrepreneurs say, I just want to set up my own business. As soon as I graduate, I want to set. And I said, hang on, can I suggest? Unless you got some, you speak 8 languages and you're a computer whiz, or you got some expertise that nobody else has got, why don't you learn what's out there in a large organization? Go and work for Google, go and work for Shopify, go and work for Safeway or Costco or whatever. If this is, you want to be in distribution, spare the dishes type thing, go and work there. You learn everything you can about. And again, I come back to the 4 here. What do they do from an operations point of view, from a marketing point of view, from a finance point of view, and from a HR and innovation? What is it that these guys are doing? Because they're already successful. Now, you may be able to build on that, or they may be able to send you on a training course. So you work for them for 2 years, then you set something up. But don't go in blind, because they're going to be your competition. They may well wipe you out. So the learning process, and this is trying to put an old head on younger shoulders, as it were, but the advice is sound in my book, and I normally put it across in such a way that that makes sense. Rather than leave school, I've got no practical experience, and yet want to set up a multi-million-dollar company. Well, seriously? Well, good luck.
And that does happen. People do it, and some people are built to be entrepreneurs. But I think the reality is, for me, it gave me a perspective. Working for another person in larger organizations, it gave me perspective, and it also stopped me from second guessing myself,
and maybe mentorship,
a lot of the time.
And
and everyone has a different path.
Even if this organization has done well, and you look in there and you look at who is the finance person who is making this, what are the budgets that they've got, and what are the ratios in terms of cash flow, which has made this so successful? Because, I mean, the basic stats of, 70% of organisations that start off in the UK go bust within the first year in the UK because of cash flow problems. Now, if you know that, well, you're going to be in them 30%. Or marketing. Who's the great marketing guy here? What's that person's background? Operational. How long has the person been here? HR. What are the training and developments, the benefits which provide the hooks for a person to want to stay here?
But see, Dad, this is the whole point, I think, actually, that wraps it up really well, that we haven't even said yet. Curiosity.
Oh, absolutely.
Being curious, and you've said this before, Dad, in a recent podcast you were in as well, is approach things with a curiosity. Because as you were speaking, I worked at one point, Raquel, I don't think I've brought this up, but I worked for an independent consultancy that provided consultancy to international trade and development organizations. And I started ITAD. I worked there for a little while, and I loved that job. And it was, I had no idea it was a temp job. They actually ended up paying double what they should have to hire me, because when you hire someone who was just a temp, it costs more money than to just hire a new person. So I had to still interview for that job. And what I had realized was by the time I was getting ready to leave, I was moving out away from the UK, actually. They had said to me, we'd really like you to stay on. And they were very interested in me learning how to become a consultant. I was the office manager. I just, at the time, I just wanted a part-time job. And I didn't want a lot of responsibility because I wanted to do my music career. And at that stage, I couldn't do anything in the music industry. I had to do one job and then go for my musical dreams only. And my point is, the reason they were so interested in me is because I would go up and do the things, the printing, and I'd look at the pieces of paper and I'd be like, oh, there are a whole bunch of spelling mistakes on this. Or there's, and one day I remember walking up to one of the partners, who was pretty intimidating for a early 20-year-old. I walked upstairs and I was like, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but I think you should know that there's spelling errors all over these. And I was like, I went to go and correct them when I was putting them in, but I wanted to check with you first. And he burst out laughing and he was like, this is a training exercise that we had for people who are learning English as a second language. So yes, absolutely. And he was like, and he stopped and he was like, you work in the office? And I was like, yeah. And I mean, to be fair, my degree is in international business, but none of them knew that. I never brought that up. And he was like, why did you check? And I was like, well, I was just interested. And he was like, well, do you want to know what we're doing? And I said, yeah, sure. And so he walked me through and was like, well, this is what we're doing. And I was like, but why are you doing this? And why are you doing that? And by the end of the conversation, he was like, we might be able to find some room in the budget to bring you to Africa with us next time. And then you can see it yourself. And that was such a lovely affirmation to me that being curious about something, it doesn't just show performatively that you're interested and so that you're more valuable. If you take a genuine interest in what someone is doing, then they realize that you're someone that they want to bring with you more often than not. And I think that's what, Raquel, you and I are building. And Dad, you know this with Bombshells. The last few weeks have been so manic for us because we've just been going, we need to build, we need to expand, we need to do this aggressively or assertively, I guess I would say. And we need people who we can trust, who want to come with us, who are asking questions. Because the ones who don't ask questions, and Dad has said this so often, it's the ones who don't ask questions that just put their head down and do things are the ones that you're going to have to constantly keep an eye on, and that's an energy drain. As an entrepreneur, as a creative, for me, with Brittany in publishing, she writes me these questions: have you done this? Have you done this? I'm interested in this. What else are you doing in your life? Like, and my agent as well, they constantly know, they're curious about what I'm doing. That's a team you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think if I can come back to Raquel's question there, just because I know we're running out of time, as it were. Your question was on sort of bordered on leadership, bordered on culture, and bordered on organisations, as it were. And if we can link that in with fit, I think what I would suggest here, what immediately springs to mind is, and again about understanding yourself, is hard skills, soft skills. And if we put the entrepreneur in it as well, it is knowing what you can do yourself, what is your flair, as it were, and knowing what's out there which can help or encompass and embellish your flair, as it were, so you are focusing on what you really want to do. I often say to people, when someone say about a resume, they say, oh, and what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? Always pick as a weakness a hard skill. In other words, I don't know how to use Reddit. I don't know how to use Microsoft Word, because that's easily remedial. Do not say one of my weaknesses is a soft skill. I have a personality. I mean, I don't. But
oh no,
but if you say, well, I'm short-tempered. So therefore, if you understand this, hard skills, soft skills, you're an entrepreneur. Again, if I come back to my four areas, operations, marketing, finance, and HR, what is it that you're good at? What are it that you can offset? Where can you learn from it? And now your comment was about culture, leadership, and organizations. So leadership, if you look at many of the books, and I've got one of them here that I use a lot, is the author is Nordhaus. Okay, Nordhaus.
On leadership. No, I've got it. You gave it to me.
Okay, all right. Well, you've okay.
It's in my
Nordhaus on leadership. What is? No, I've got.
Oh,
6
right.
The authors send them to me. I get them free, you see. But the whole idea of that. It is.
Oh, that one doesn't have all the multicolored tabs in it, Dad. Good job. I got that one.
No, but that was my point. That there are quizzes at the end of every single chapter, so you can better understand yourself. And when we talk about entrepreneurs, you're talking about two things as transactional leaderships or transformational, which is, embracing change. Now, if you take the old analogy on leadership and you look at Winston Churchill and you look at Hitler and Gandhi, you've got to put it into an era that people understand what is going on at those times in certain organizations. So therefore the culture can be defined as, this is the way we do things around here. If at a certain time they're downsizing, and you're joining this particular company, you've got to have a pretty tough exterior because you may be laid off in 2 weeks. If it's in a growth strategy, everyone's happy and friendly and all the rest of it, but things could change. So therefore, the leadership qualities, if we come back to this hard skills and soft skills, I'm not saying, let's say, for example, you're not very good at finance. I'm not going to say go and get an MBA in finance because it will drive you nuts. But what I am saying is maybe get a certificate in finance, the basics, so you know the questions to ask of a CFO when it comes to sort of financial ratios that you can understand so you can ask meaningful questions.
Right.
So again, looking at the culture and the leadership, you need to understand yourself first, then who is it I can go to better answer questions for me who are not going to make me feel embarrassed?
Right.
And it may well be not necessarily the finance manager. It might be a finance officer who's got 2 years experience, similar background to you, who can put it into meaningful, practical circumstances or stories that are going to resonate with you. And then after that, by going to people, you will understand, this is a leadership answer here, you'll say, I like the way that person spoke to me. I like the way that person informed me. I do not like the approach to that person. I do not like the tone. So therefore, you're starting to bring on board for you becoming you. And that is a passage of time. And this comes back to, Raquel, your comment about the master's program, the reflective piece. You're doing it as part of an academic study. What I'm saying to people is you don't have to be doing a master's degree to be able to be reflective. You'll probably end up in 5 years' time coming to the conclusion that that was a good idea. I'm saying do it now because you're the only loser on this, if I can use the losing expression. I'm saying step forward. Who dares wins, which is an adage I like. There is no loss to it. The journey itself is part of the benefit. So that's a cultural leadership dimension as well within all organizations, depending on the time frame that they're going through. Sorry, I know that was a very quick answer, but yeah.
No, that was a good answer. Yeah, that is the perfect way to wrap everything up. I think, gosh, we went through all of the things. We went through all, like I said, firing at people to firing people, cultural leadership.
No. It's not firing. It's strategically releasing.
Okay. Well, strategically releasing. Well, I'm going to strategically release our audience now, and say thank you, Dad, for being so informative. I'm not going to give you many compliments because otherwise your head won't fit out the door and then Mum will have to try and squeeze you through to the other side. But no, that was hugely impactful, and I think so many people will have so many great takeaways from this.
Thank you so much, Dr. T.
No problem. I hope it helps somebody at some stage.
Thanks for listening, Bombshells. In order to continue to elevate, subscribe and don't forget to click that little bell so you can get notified every time we have a new badass brunch. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.